Hello everyone, welcome back to the Flicks Files. It's time for another deep dive on a movie. And it's been a while since I talked about a British movie on my channel. I have a playlist that I'm building called Best of British. And that's to do with movies that were made in England with a primarily British cast and crew. And I think the last one I did was Kes, which was a couple of months ago now. But for this video, it's going to be kind of an experiment, and I'm going to try and edit this in a different way. And rather than how I would normally do it, is just sit in front of my camera, I thought I would try and do a deep dive where I include a lot more footage of the movie and kind of do a voiceover instead of you having to look at my ugly mug for 20 minutes. So yes, this will be a very slightly different way that I do a deep dive. So please let me know what you think, if you prefer this newer way of doing it, or you would prefer me to just go back to how I was doing it before. So please let me know. This is an experiment. I'm hoping it works out well because I've really loved the movie that I'm going to be talking about. So I want to do it justice. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you in a little while.
Being cheap is one thing. Looking cheap is another. That really takes talent.
Some women are whores, some whores are black. You take what you're given, don't you? I didn't ask to drive you around, I was giving you. Same as you was giving me. The only difference is you complain and I don't.
I've always been a huge fan of Bob Hoskins, and I've always considered him one of the best actors to have come out of England in the 20th century. He had a very unique kind of screen presence and charisma that made him stand out in an original way. Whether he was playing a crime boss or starring opposite a cartoon rabbit, his roles were always armoured with realism and testosterone. And the world just became a poorer place when he sadly passed away in 2014 at the age of 71. My first introduction to seeing Bob Hoskins was when I saw the absolutely stellar British crime film The Long Good Friday, which, by the way, is definitely a film I'll be doing a deep dive of on this channel at some point in the near future, so please subscribe if you'd be interested in seeing that. And The Long Good Friday, I first saw that around 1983 and watched it many times over the next couple of years, and it quickly became one of my all-time favourite movies. And I would say 90% of that is just down to Bob Hoskins and the performance that he gave in that movie. So it was around the latter part of 1986, early 1987, that I would have heard about a new movie that, much like The Long Good Friday, was based in and around contemporary London, and it had Bob Hoskins as the main character. And it was those two things that were enough to make me desperately want to see this movie when I first heard about it. And of course that movie is Mona Lisa. So my first viewing of Mona Lisa would have been way back in 1987 on VHS. And I can clearly remember seeing the box on the shelf in the video shop, and it had a very seedy poster on the cover and the tagline, she was a tart, he was an ex-con. And I think it was about 4 or 5 years after that it was broadcast on Channel 4, I think it was, and I recorded it off there, and that was my go-to copy for a number of years. And it's only recently that the terrific Arrow Video Company released a special edition Blu-ray of it. As always with Arrow, it's just a superb release with a remastered picture and a wealth of extra content. And it was just such a joy to revisit this film again after so long. And while some elements of it are very 1980s, and that's not a criticism, by the way. If anything, it's one of the many things about this film that I love. It still holds up incredibly well. It's just terrifically acted. It has a really engaging plot, and it's just a well-made British movie.
And now, our location interview. Bob Hoskins is an actor who's made his name playing tough guys in films such as The Long Good Friday and The Cotton Club. More recently, he's made 2 films back-to-back, both with Michael Caine. Sweet Liberty, directed by Alan Alda, and Mona Lisa, directed by Neil Jordan, whose last film was Company of Wolves. Film 86 joined them on location at a London hotel, as did the film's famous ex-Beatle producer and his famous friend.
Well, how do you do, Mr. Hoskins?
All right, son.
Good?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the jig with the fella upstairs, was it? All right.
What's wrong with you?
I don't know. What's wrong with me?
So as the film opens, we're introduced to Bob Hoskins' character George, and he's fresh out of prison. And he decides that the first thing he wants to do is to reconnect with his family and go and visit his daughter and his ex-wife. And he buys a bunch of flowers and he goes to their house, and I think his daughter opens the door and realizes it's her father with a look of shock on her face. But the ex-wife quickly appears and tells him that he's been gone too long and slams the door in his face. And it's there that he meets up with one of his best friends, who's played by the wonderful actor Robbie Coltrane. And his character in the movie is kind of a mechanic, and he's been looking after Bob Hoskins' car while he's been in prison. And he stays with him. He's living with him throughout the movie while he tries to get back on his feet. And Robbie Coltrane just adds a real hint of lightness to the movie, and whenever he appears in a scene, it just adds a little bit of levity, which the film needs because it is quite a gritty, urban, and in some respects quite downbeat movie. And Robbie Coltrane's character, as I say, is a mechanic, but he has a sideline of trying to make a quick buck by bulk buying various types of ornaments that hopefully you can sell on. And these are things like ceramic plates of spaghetti bolognese, and he has like a big collection of lamps in the shape of the Virgin Mary that he's trying to sell on. And yeah, he's just a lovely little role to have in this film. So it's then that George goes back to see his old boss, and he's given a bleeper. This is the 1980s after all, and he's told that he's got to drive this high-class escort around London to her various rich clients. And this he does, and he starts to quickly feel out of his element as he goes into all of these posh hotels, and he's hanging around in reception waiting for her. And there's some lovely friction at the beginning where she's not happy that she's lumbered with this working class driver, as she's trying to be all posh, and she takes offence at the way he talks and the way he dresses.
I've done it wrong again, haven't I? Okay, I've got it wrong. That's... What do you expect? I'm not used to working in pissholes like this.
It kind of gets to the end of the working day, and he's been driving around various clients, and he waits in the car. And at the end of the shift, she asks him to drive her to the King's Cross, the red light district, so she can look at all the working ladies there. But she doesn't tell him why, but he just does it anyway. And it's there that she gives him some money and tells him that if he's going to be a driver, he needs to buy some decent clothes and look the part. And there's a really funny moment where the next day she sees him waiting in reception. He's bought himself a hideous Hawaiian shirt and jacket, which she immediately takes offense at. And there's a moment where things come to a head and they have this big argument in the car, and he ends up just pulling over to the side of the road and kicking her out of the car. He's just had enough of it, and he just gets really angry with her.
Get out! Get fucking out, baby! Now tell me I'm fired.
All right, you're fired.
Lovely. I'm fired and you're street walking.
But you can tell that he immediately regrets this, and he's obviously starting to have some feelings for her. So he turns the car around and picks her up from the side of the road. And she decides to actually take him clothes shopping and help him pick out a really nice suit that he can wear. And he agrees to this, and he picks a suit out, and there's a lovely moment when he's waiting in one of the hotels and he's admiring himself in the mirror. And you start to realise that being with this hooker and the relationship he's striking up with her is just trying to make him a better man. And as always, at the end of the shift, she asks him to drive her to King's Cross so they can look at all the working girls. And he takes her home, and she explains to him that she used to work with a young girl called Kathy, and she had a bit of a drug problem, and they had an argument with the pimp that they worked for, and she woke up one morning and he'd gone and taken Kathy with him, and she asked Bob Hoskins to help her find Kathy, and if he can ask around the contacts that he has in the red light business. And he agrees to help her, and he wants to try and do right for her. And we see that he's picking his daughter up from school, and he's striking up a friendship with his daughter. And the next time he's with the call girl, he's being more loving towards her, and it's just so nice, and you can see that their relationship's starting to form, and he's beginning to care for her. And this leads into my favourite scene in the whole movie. And the sequence just plays out with Bob Hoskins as he visits various shady establishments in the red light district, as he's asking around if anyone has seen a young prostitute called Kathy that's got blonde hair, and he's doing his detective work. And you can see that all the places he's visiting are real places. And I heard that Neil Jordan actually hired real call girls for some of these roles, and it just comes across so realistically, and it's a really interesting snapshot of London at that time as Bob Hoskins visits all of these different shady bars and establishments as he's asking about this young girl. And as he's asking around, he comes across one of his old work colleagues, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, we have a woman working for us that fits that description. She's young, she's blonde, and I'll arrange a meeting with her if you want." And Bob Hoskins goes along with this, and he meets this young girl in this seedy room, and he realizes straight away that it's not her, but he feels sorry for her because he can see that she's a young girl and she's been beaten by a pimp, and it's just such an awful moment to see, and you feel really sorry for this young girl. And it's at this point that we see Michael Caine's character in full for the first time, and he's the guy in charge of a lot of these seedy places in the red light district. And he explains to Bob Hoskins that he wants to know what Simone, the prostitute that he's driving, is getting up to with a particular client who's this rich Arab guy. And he asks him to try and get information as to what they get up to when they go into the room. And Bob Hoskins is saying, "Well, how am I supposed to do that? She doesn't tell me anything." And he says, "Well, ask her. Keep asking her." So he asks her, and she just says, "Oh, we just drink tea. That's all we get up to." And to prove the point, while he's waiting in the car, she sends the waiter down, and he hands him a couple of photographs of her drinking tea. So when he hands these to Michael Caine, he's not happy.
You trying to be funny, George?
I told you, Dennis, she drinks tea.
You are funny, Georgie.
Well, I suppose I am, yeah.
Get something better.
Well, how do you mean better?
I mean, dirty, nasty, slimy, kinky.
And once again, Bob Hoskins is on the detective trail, and he overhears that Michael Caine has asked for this young prostitute with blonde hair for one of his clients. So he follows him to his house, and he goes inside, and he finds a secret room with a one-way mirror, and he can see this young girl is being abused by this old guy, and we don't even want to think what he's doing to her. But he waits for the old guy to turn his back, and he opens the secret door to the room, and he pulls the young girl out of there, and he carries her away out of the house and effectively rescues her. And he takes her to like a service station, and he's explaining to her that he's driving this lady called Simone who knows her, and he wants him to try and find her. And they finally meet up, and they all decide to go to one of her old haunts in Brighton to get out of the area to stay safe, because they know that the pimp will be looking for her. and they check into a hotel room, and it's there that Bob Hoskins realizes that the Simone and Kathy were in fact lovers, and they're just lesbian lovers, and he feels really betrayed by this because he's just a normal working class guy who's fallen in love with Simone. And it's a hard moment to watch, and you realize that with the upbringing that he had, he's not used to that kind of thing, and he just expects her to love him back as the way he loves her, and can't accept that she's in love with this other woman. So they go for a walk on the pier, and you can see that Bob Hoskins is increasingly getting angrier as he realizes that Simone is never going to be able to love him back. And it's just a really great sequence where he becomes increasingly unhinged and starts to get more and more angry towards her, as he's realizing she's a lesbian and they could never ever be a couple.
You know the way it is between men and fucking women, eh? Come and say something. Anything, say it.
And it's here that she notices that her pimp is behind him and has followed them and starts chasing them down, which leads to a moment of violence from Bob Hoskins as he stops them in their tracks. And they get back to the hotel room to find that Michael Caine is waiting for them, and he's confronting them and asking them why they ran away in the first place. But what he doesn't realise is that Simone has a pistol on her, and she intends to use it in a final shocking moment of violence.
The two of them.
Oh! Don't touch me! Don't!
She's got a gun! Fucking toes off, John!
It's now, doesn't it?
And she then turns the pistol onto George, and he's egging her on, saying, "Go on, pull the trigger," and knocks it out of her hand before she actually does. And it's at that moment he realises that he means absolutely nothing to her, and she would have just killed him along with the others. And there we get to the end of the movie, where he's completely heartbroken, and all of the journey that he's gone through over the last few days has amounted to absolutely nothing. He's almost back to where he started, apart from the fact that he's now reunited with his daughter. And that's the end of the movie. Now, I've kind of gone through that in very broad strokes, but there is a lot more colour there to the movie when you watch it all the way through, and there's a lot more scenes that fill it out really nicely and just make it a really good character piece. But I've tried to cover it as briefly as I can to keep the video short. But I do encourage you to watch this. It's an absolutely fantastic movie. So there we are. That's my new format of deep dives. Please let me know if you prefer that method of me doing it with a voiceover rather than how I have been doing it, or whether you would just prefer me to do it as I did before. So please let me know. But either way, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will be back on Tuesday with another news update and then another deep dive next Friday. So thanks again for watching. Bye bye for now.